In January 1944, Fifth Army Commander General Clark ordered a massive attack against the Gustav Line to stop the Germans from transferring troops to Anzio, to draw additional forces to the line and break it, and to link up with the Anzio bridgehead. It would involve 3 army corps in 4 phases. On the right, the French Expeditionary Corps was to lead off on the 12th of January and advance to seize high ground north and northwest of Cassino. 3 days later, America's 2 Corps was to secure Monte Trocchio. This would be followed by Britain's 10 Corps on the left, crossing the Garigliano River. 10 Corps was then to attack to the north and northwest to take the high ground dominating the Liri Valley from the south. The final blow would be dealt on the 20th of January by 2 Corps crossing the Gari River south of Highway 6. That would be followed by a drive involving armour up to the Liri Valley towards Frosinone. By then, 6 Corps would be ashore at Anzio, where the initial landings were scheduled for the 22nd of January. The French attack began on schedule with an artillery barrage on the 12th of January. By the end of the 15th of January, the 3rd Algerian Division and the 2nd Moroccan Division had advanced up to 6 miles to the upper reaches of the Rapido, captured more than a dozen peaks of up to 4,000 feet, and inflicted heavy casualties on the German 5th Mounted Division. This took the 5th Army front to little more than a mile from the central spine of the Gustav Line north of Cassino, but the French army was by then exhausted and had to pause. The 34th Division attack on Trocchio began on the 15th, but the Germans had withdrawn to fortifications on the west bank of the Gari. The 5th Army's attention now shifted to the Garigliano, more than 20 miles to the south. Britain's 10 Corps, commanded by General Richard McCreery, was responsible for 20 miles of the 5th Army front, from the mouth of the river to the village of Sant'Ambrogio. The Garigliano was up to 100 yards wide, and the principal barrier to the Corps' advance. 2 bridges over the river had been destroyed, and the crossing would have to be done by boat. Approaches to the Garigliano's banks had been heavily mined, as were the principal exit routes to the west. There were strong German defences on the foothills overlooking the Garigliano, and German patrols were active on both sides of the river after dark. McCreery decided to use a relatively large force with strong naval, air and artillery support in what was named Operation Panther. It would include Britain's 5th Division, which was to be transferred secretly to 10 Corps the night before the attack. The opposition was the German 94th Division. 10th Army Commander General Wichtenhoff assured Supreme Commander in Italy, Field Marshal Albert Kesselring, in a telephone call on the 17th of January, that nothing extraordinary was in the offing. We are having moonless nights, which he has been avoiding so far. While artillery pounded German defensive positions, 167 and 169 brigades in the 56th Division rode across the Garigliano under a smoke screen and covering small arms fire. Meanwhile, 2 battalions of 5th Division crossed in assault boats near the mouth of the river, while a 3rd used a Bailey pontoon raft. Amphibious vehicles known as ducks, with the 2nd Battalion of the Royal Scots Fusiliers and a tank landing craft carrying engineers and tanks, sailed around the mouth of the river. But only the ducks arrived at the correct beach, 2,000 yards to the west. Disembarking Fusiliers found themselves in minefields. The landing craft had run ashore on the Allied side of the river. It took until noon on the 18th of January for men and equipment to be ferried across the Garigliano to where the Fusiliers had landed. They had by then already cleared a path through the mines. Mines and artillery fire prevented the construction of bridges. Only ferries and rafts could be used for the reinforcements and to evacuate casualties for the first 24 hours of the assault. Nevertheless, 10 Corps got 10 battalions over the Garigliano by the night of the 18th. On the 19th of January, the 5th Division seized Minturno. By then, 56th Division held a bridgehead almost 2 miles deep in the hills immediately overlooking the river, though an attempt to capture Castelforte made by the 1st Battalion of the London Irish Rifles the previous night had been repulsed by its German garrison. Progress in the 5th and 56th Division sectors was to be slow from now on. On the Corps' right flank, the 46th Division sent 2 battalions of 128 Hampshire Brigade to cross the Garigliano near Sant'Ambrogio, a village on the river's west bank, with commanding views north over the Gari and Rapido Valley. The river was flowing fast. The critical problem was the lack of amphibious vehicles. They had been given to 10 Corps to compensate for those lost in rehearsals for the Anzio landing. The Hampshire Brigade used paddle boats instead. 1 company of the 2nd Battalion crossed the Garigliano, but the cable control for the boats which were to follow became snagged and broke. The boats were swept downstream. Another battalion made a total of 14 attempts to get a line across the river, but had no more success when they tried to use the 2nd Battalion's crossing point. As dawn approached, the attack was abandoned. The battalions returned to their former position on the east side of the river. This meant that 2 Corps planned to send the 36th Division across the Rapido that night would have no support from the left. General Clark's diary suggests he foresaw the consequences. The projected attack of the 36th Division has little chance of success on account of the heavy defensive position of the enemy west of the Rapido. I maintain that it is essential that I make that attack, fully expecting heavy losses, in order to hold all the troops on my front and draw more to it, thereby clearing the way for Shingle. The attack of the 36th Division across the Rapido is on